And there is no reason for making people fearful. You have to create something, you provoke an incident that makes people feel insecure. And then you come and tell them, I will protect you. It's a phenomenon. I don't want to talk I don't want to go into the controversy, but again, this idea of terrorism. Okay, we collectively in this area, Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Uganda, we don't want someone to disrupt our own peace and collective benefits. Anyone, even a local person, is not allowed. And all communities don't allow someone to come and disrupt harmony and peace in society, even when it's coming from inside. It's not acceptable. Now, this threat, if it exists, if this threat is there, we could fight it without AFRICOM. Okay? We don't need anyone's help. We don't need missiles. We don't need high tech to fight this threat if it exists. But this is, whether it was real or imagined, has been used to frighten people everywhere. In Europe, in the Americas, in Africa, Asia. It's the only tool, in fact, of the last decade. It became the only viable tool for them, for the special interest, to use it to threaten people, make people, oh, there is going to be a bomb in Paris, there is going to be a bomb in a train station, there is going to be a bomb here or there, distract people from their attention and make them feel insecure. And then who can secure their lives? Bush was telling the world, we will make the world safer.
Yes.
But you can read it the other way around, because he wants to make the world unsafe so that he can promote his own special interest.
Welcome to DRAR for Africa. Eritrea, a nation under siege. Western media paints a picture of a failed state, ignoring the remarkable strides this resilient nation has made in the face of sanctions and deliberate misinformation. This video explores the truth about Eritrea's journey towards food security and economic growth. Is Eritrea truly a failed state? Western media often portrays a grim reality, but the truth is far more nuanced. This video delves into the realities of life in Eritrea, showcasing the country's resilience, its efforts to overcome challenges, and its vision for a prosperous future. Despite facing decades of sanctions and relentless negative media portrayals, Eritrea has demonstrated remarkable resilience. This video highlights the country's unwavering commitment to food security and economic development, showcasing the innovative solutions and unwavering spirits of its people. Let's begin.
As I begin, perhaps it is useful to offer an introductory overview. Possessing a rich, immensely complex history, a colorful blend of beautiful cultures, and lively, vibrant diversity, Eritrea is one of the world's youngest countries. In 1991, after waging one of the longest, loneliest national wars for liberation in modern African history, and following tens of thousands of deaths, numerous more injuries, and complete destruction, Eritrea, terribly outmanned, massively outgunned, globally ignored, and seemingly against all logic, defeated Africa's largest, best-equipped army and finally won its freedom. Located in the turbulent Horn of Africa, straddling one of the globe's key geostrategic regions, Eritrea is a relatively small country bordered by Djibouti, Sudan, and Ethiopia. It has a long, pristine coastline on the Red Sea, spanning well over 3,000 kilometers, among the lengthiest in Africa. Mainly arid and semi-arid, receiving very little and erratic rainfall, Eritrea has 6 political administrative regions, which vary substantially in terms of their respective size, population, biodiversity, geography, and socioeconomic conditions. The population is approximately 3.6 million people, with about 40% under 15 years of age, thus presenting significant potential for a demographic dividend in the years ahead. Eritrea's people fall into 9 separate ethno-linguistic groups and are split almost evenly between Christianity and Islam, with each representing nearly half of the population. Almost 2/3 of Eritreans currently live in rural areas, although urbanization is increasing. At present, Eritrea is classified as a low-income developing country, and while economic growth has been characterized by considerable volatility in past years, there is a relatively positive outlook for the near to mid-term. The economy is largely based on subsistence, rain-fed agriculture, and pastoralism, while mining has emerged as an increasingly significant sector, now accounting for the majority of FDI and exports. Other areas holding sizable promise include manufacturing, tourism, and the blue economy. Past the sensationalized headlines and diametrically opposed to the raft of misguided assumptions, Eritrea has managed to register important developmental progress in a number of different areas. For example, in terms of child mortality, regarded by health experts worldwide as an effective proxy indicator for overall child health and well-being, Eritrea has dramatically improved from 146 deaths per 1,000 live births in 1991 to 38 in 2021. Placing that into better context, it has moved from having one of the worst under 5 mortality rates anywhere on the planet to now being among the leaders on the continent and within the broader developing world.
Our region is full of educative experiences.
As to the future, the president believes that the global uprising against hegemonic power has begun, and there is reason to be hopeful.
It's part of the global situation created by their misguided policies that has made the poor poorer and special interest groups controlling everything. Ultimately, that polarization will have to lead to some kind of revolt. And people are revolting everywhere. It's not in the Arab world, it's not in Africa, it's not in Europe, it's everywhere. We are entering a new world order. The world order of the Cold War is finished. The last 20 years we have seen a world order where adventure and hegemony has been very phenomenal. Now it's declining, for sure. So on the speed of change, we may have our own ideas, but on the fact that this is a change coming and going, and it's going to be better.
Not a day goes by without new slander against Eritrea and her people. The nation has even been the subject of articles about Iranian submarine bases that these children are no doubt being trained to operate.
Are you working on a nuclear weapon at the moment?
I had to ask the president one last question.
Thank you, Mr. President, for doing the interview. I look forward to reading in the mainstream media about the Eritrean nuclear weapons program.
In thinking about how African countries are covered within Western mainstream media, what one quickly comes to realize is that they largely aren't. Instead, they are generally overlooked or ignored. However, in terms of the small body of coverage that does exist, African countries are portrayed, discussed, and analyzed in a manner that leaves a lot to be desired. Indeed, much ought to be improved. Africa, a huge country, a huge continent, home to 54 countries, over 1 billion people, numerous and ethno-linguistic groups, over 2,000 languages, and enormous complexity, is more often than not overgeneralized and reduced to what Reinhold Niebuhr once called emotionally potent oversimplifications. Invariably, it is painted with a crude brush and broad strokes, while commonly being spoken about as if it was a homogeneous, uniform entity or a monolithic unit. What is more, coverage of Africa remains largely fixated on an extremely narrow circle of topics: rampant corruption, debilitating poverty, drought and famine, savage, senseless conflicts, hordes of migrants at the gates, and terrorism. There is hardly ever any nuance or context within stories and analyses. While triumphs, progress, and positive developments across the continent, of which there are certainly many, tend to be wholly disregarded or not afforded the level and depth of attention that they genuinely merit. In disconcerting echoes of the past, The language and tone used still present African countries as perennially inconsequential and lacking significant global import. It seems that some remain utterly unable to accept the basic fact that Africans have agency and they can, actually often do, find creative answers, develop effective solutions, and produce things of considerable merit. Africa is framed as feeble, dependent, and an eternal hapless victim in need of saving, with the prevailing narrow-minded and flatly wrong conventional wisdom suggesting that no problems can be solved, that no challenges or obstacles can be surmounted, that no true progress can be made unless it is external, specifically Western, actors that are doing the planning, directing, and implementing. Of course, this troubling affliction is not limited solely to the Western mainstream media. It is also highly prevalent and deeply rooted within the West's political structures, the hallowed ivory towers of academia, and other institutions. It is still vividly fresh in the memory how Donald Trump crassly denigrated a collection of African and other global South countries as shithole countries. And lest anyone is tempted to blithely dismiss those comments as the racist ramblings of an uncouth, eccentric, loose cannon, Josep Borrell, Europe's senior-most diplomat, abhorrently compared Europe to a beautiful, serene garden and the world to a jungle, while also suggesting that African countries that failed to fall perfectly in line with the West's stance on the Russia-Ukraine crisis were devoid of minimal intelligence. Here, it is worth noting that when it comes to African countries, mainstream media and leading institutions seem to only hold up Westerners as experts and authoritative voices, although these individuals frequently cannot speak the languages of or have never actually set foot on the continent. At the same time, sad and astonishing, they unwaveringly persist in platforming these individuals as preeminent experts and authorities, despite the fact that they boast a long track record of only highly flawed assessments and analyses disconnected from reality and wildly inaccurate predictions. Meanwhile, thoroughly qualified and highly experienced individuals from across Africa are rarely looked to for their views or analyses of their own countries, let alone the West. Ultimately, the result of this multi-level framework and line of approach is tired cliches, nauseating stereotypes, facile assumptions, and gross distortions that fail to provide an even vaguely accurate or somewhat reliable account of the countries of the continent or their objective on-the-ground realities. Sadly, we are left with a deep lack of clarity, at times shocking levels of ignorance, and vast lacunae in understanding about Africa, its people, its history, and its ongoing circumstances. This is the contextual backdrop for my comments today, as everything that I have just mentioned, the grossly distorted narrative, the demonization and dehumanizing, the rigid paternalistic framing, and the patronizing condescension has been a defining characteristic of coverage and analysis about Eritrea. To be sure, allow me to underscore that my aim today is not to offer a glowing encomium to Eritrea or to suggest that it is completely beyond reproach or criticism. It is not. The country, like all others around the world, has many faults and is confronted by numerous significant challenges and demanding concerns. And like all countries and political spaces worldwide and throughout history, it is incredibly complex. However, along the lines of the African novelist Chimamanda Adichie's cautionary articulations about the weighty dangers of a single story, there are also many other dimensions to Eritrea, far beyond the harshly negative, sensationalized depiction that remains front, center, and overwhelmingly dominant. The pursuit of deeper understanding, the search for collective sense-making, the quest for advancing knowledge necessitates moving beyond rigidity and acknowledging that there is good, worth, and dignity everywhere in this world. As rightly put by Bhikkhu Parekh, no culture has a monopoly on wisdom. No culture embodies all the great values. And therefore, each country has a great deal to learn from others through dialogue. Thus, in contrast to romanticizing Eritrea, my comments actually serve to problematize the long-standing flawed narrative and slanted, accepted portrayal about the country, with a particular focus on development.
There are a lot of bad news just spreading around the world about this country, about its safety, about its security, about its, I don't know, just its political status, but that's not what matters. What matters is what the people are really like. The people are not like that. The people are not like terrorists. They're not just, I don't know, they're not what they explain us in the news. We're different people. We love our country. We love our culture. We love our people. We respect our family, our friends, our elders. That's really hard to find abroad.
You know, I want to go back to a story in 2018, and this is right before the peace agreement was finalized. I was talking to Minister Edefani, the agriculture minister, and he was telling me about these amazing programs in agriculture that the UN had told me were truly groundbreaking, that no one was even close. And I was saying to him afterwards, you know, this is so amazing. So how often do you go to international conferences? I said, I go sometimes. I said, how often are you asked to speak about this? And he laughed and said, come now, Carol, no one wants to hear from the Eritrean minister. And, you know, we both laughed about it. But the reality is, these are solutions that everybody could be using. And that this whole thing around the narrative, in a sense, we have robbed the rest of the world of solutions, and we've robbed Africa of inspiration. You know, I tell people about Eritrea and Eritrean development in particular all the time. And the reaction always from Africans is, how come we never hear about this? How come I don't know about this? These are the kind of stories that I want. The story of Eritrean development is the story of African solutions to African challenges. Eritrea is the purest we may ever see of true, pure African-led development. And it's an extraordinarily inspiring story, especially a story for Africans that they want to hear, they're craving to hear. And so we really need to get that story out there. You know, I know that Eritrea is a role model and it can change the world because I know that it already has.
People should just look at things in a balanced way, that not everything they read or hear about Eritrea is necessarily correct, and that Eritrea is a country that has a very, very sad history of being abused and misused over the years. Despite that, it has managed to become an independent country. And I've come to the conclusion that don't believe the media, because it's been discredited.